You know, I'm going to give you a history lesson.
We got some dumbass motherfuckers floating around this country.
Stop laughing! And when I do, start.
Also, y'all did some nasty ass jokes on my ass too.
Funny jokes and unfunny jokes come out of the same birth.
You f***ing guys are unbelievable.
Why are you laughing?
Evening, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Why You Laughing, a history of comedy podcast. And today, I am pleased to introduce to you Carrot Top, the legend, and not just Carrot Top, but really the disrespect of Carrot Top that he has received throughout his illustrious career, spanning essentially 40 years. This man has been around and is a staple of Vegas comedy, but is also just a punching bag. He's the punchline for so much material of what would be considered hack comedy, and I don't think it's warranted. We've done episodes that have kind of circled around this in the past. Dane Cook, we kind of had the opinion of like, this guy got beat up so much, but he was massive for a time. The Amazing Jonathan, we kind of did that, had that discussion a little bit. And as I was going through Carrot Top, I was going to originally just do, as we often do, kind of the life and career of Carrot Top. And then as I was watching interviews with him, the angle I found more interesting is just the flat out disrespect he's gotten throughout his illustrious comedy career. It's pretty wild when you think about it. I didn't see a ton of like Carrot Top controversies. Seems like he's kept his head down for the most part. So if I missed stuff, let me know, and we could always do a life and career episode of Carrot Top. But the angle that I found, and we'll touch on some of that stuff, of course, but the angle that I found more interesting is how he's looked down on comedy, yet is so massively successful. So I hope you guys enjoy hearing about that today. And like I said, if you have anything else to contribute, feel free to leave it in the comments. You can go to blindmike.net, find us on all platforms, wherever you get podcasts, Apple, Spotify, Google Play, wherever you listen to all your programs. Particularly YouTube is the way the kids are doing it these days. A friend of mine named Tom Myers told me that no one listens to podcasts on YouTube, but I'm not sure that's true. So continue to like and comment if you wouldn't mind. And then if you want to put even more support behind the show, we always appreciate that. You can become a Patreon or YouTube member. You get early access as well as bonus content. So consider becoming a patron or a YouTube member if you like the show and you want early stuff. But we appreciate the free members as well. Whatever you guys see fit. Light up the algorithm in any way you can. So let's start getting into Carrot Top here. Scott Thompson, as some people may know him, although it didn't dawn on me, there's also Scott Thompson in Kids the Hall. I think they talk about that in one of our first clips here. But he didn't change his name because of that. He had kind of an interesting approach to comedy, and this is one angle. I think if we're going to criticize Carrot Top for anything, it might be right out of the gate here in this first clip, because I can understand why this mentality might rub some comics the wrong way. But this is how he approached comedy, or at least his career, from a very early age.
Yeah, this is about his name.
Yeah.
Getting the name.
For what it's worth, but I said I saw that a coach.
Yeah, I don't know where that came from.
Yeah.
My swimming coach named me that because that's definitely not what happened. I was always had been called other things worse than that, and I was in my dorm room. I just started to. I wasn't even a comedian yet. I just said I wanted to be a comedian, so I thought I got to draw a logo, right? So I drew a logo. And my friend says, "What's that?" I said, "It's a logo for what?" And I said, "Like for one of my classes." And I said, "No, it's for my act. You know, when I become a comedian, that's my logo." And he's like, you don't have a joke. So I said, I know, but I have a logo. That's more importantly. So I got that out of the way.
I'm thinking the same thing.
I thought of it was a brand. I was a marketing major, so I kept saying it's got to be a brand. It can't be Scott Thompson because there's already Scott Thompson Kids in the Hall. Plus, that's not a show busy name to me. So I thought, I want to be a name like when you're walking down, like Vegas, you just see it. And it stands out. And I said, Carrot Top. I don't know how it just hit me, Carrot Top. So I drew this logo with a carrot and a thing holding a microphone, and there, Carrot Top. It was a blessing and a curse, by the way, Ryan.
I hear you on that.
I mean, but it's I did it, and then someone says, Carrot Top. I'm like, what have I done?
Carrot Top's very self-deprecating and very self-aware. Like,
Yeah.
a lot of these interviews he did, a lot of them were very recently. He was making the rounds promoting his Vegas shows, and he's definitely aware of his reputation, and he's aware that he's not necessarily highbrow comedy. I think the one thing you could probably criticize him for is it's like, well, you should be thinking about probably writing material before you're thinking about selling Carrot Top merch. Like that's a weird way to approach a comedy career, I think, but that is an aspect of it. Like you hear a lot of comics on these podcasts complain now about their career not being where it should be. Well, it's because often it's because maybe you're lazy from a business perspective. Like maybe you care too much about the purity of comedy, which is great. But if you're gonna, whine about not being as popular as you should be, then maybe there should be an element of approaching it like Carrot Top. I think the guy who found the right mix of that, like passion for comedy and joke writing and all that stuff, and the marketing end and promoting yourself, is Andrew Schultz, where he seems to have the respect of his peers as far as being a comedian goes. You can definitely take some angles to make fun of Andrew Schultz. I think on Who Are These Socials, we made fun of his video that was clearly staged, where he's telling his father about how he always wanted to play Madison Square Garden. So there's some like corny stuff that he does to get attention on social media, but for the most part, he's like a respected comedian that also mastered how to get noticed. Like he was the guy that kind of paved the way for a lot of these YouTube specials and reels on TikTok and Instagram and all that stuff. So Schultz has kind of found the right mix of it, but I do think the marketing mind that Carrot Top had led to a lot of his success and understanding, like, not every comic needs to be, you don't need to bleed for your comedy the way like Dave Chappelle might have you believe,
Right.
I think that'll get you a lot of respect when you do approach it from that angle. And those are typically the comedians that I like more. But I also think if you're someone like Carrot Top who says like, I just want to, make silly goofs, make a few laughs and make money doing it, I don't think that's a horrible thing that should be shamed the way like, the perfect example of what I'm trying to say is Bill Hicks, probably, where Bill Hicks can make me laugh when he's shitting on Jay Leno for selling out.
Right.
But there's also an element of it where I'm like, well, yeah, Jay Leno has a garage full of, $200,000 cars, and Bill Hicks died miserable, So it's like, who's at the end of the day, who's really playing it right,
Right. Never thought of it that way.
Yeah. So it's something to consider, you kids out there.
Next we got him talking about starting comedy.
So this is how he went into it the way most people get into stand-up, playing open mics and stuff like that, and then this is how he kind of realized maybe props were the approach he was going to take.
But I got into it very just randomly. I was an open micer at my college, and I went up and I just told George Carlin jokes and Robin Williams jokes, and it was great. I mean, I got big reactions and it was fun. And then I slowly got into doing the real clubs, the actual comedy clubs, and I started doing my own stuff. And that's
middling,
opening,
middling,
still opening. I was just coming up with like trying to open mic still. So that's why I got into props. So I stole this Crime Watch sign and I thought it was funny. So I said, I'd walk on stage and say, sorry, I'm late. I was in the neighborhood. How good is their Crime Watch if they're not even watching their signs?
Right.
And it killed. And so I thought, oh, the lady, the book that said, do you have more of that? Because it's really good. It's really clever. It's really funny. It's visual and it's smart and it's a little bit naughty because you stole it. And I said, well, I mean, I can go steal more signs. And she said, great. So I went and I stole more signs. Yeah. And I took all these different signs.
So as it sounds to me, every joke so far has been stolen.
Yeah.
That's him on the Blocks podcast with Neil Brennan. Neil, I like Neil does a very good. We have a lot of clips from that interview because Neil does a very good job because he asks people things that like we want to know. Like he has no problem asking comics like how much money they make and things like that. Like he approaches it from an angle of what you would want to hear from some of these people, which is why he's able to get some good stuff about Gallagher, which we'll be talking about later.
Yeah.
But But yeah, so with Carrot Top, you hear that like that's where he had success. Is like one kind of throwaway joke. I guess it's his closer at the time, but at an open mic, it's really just a throwaway joke where it's a stolen sign, and then someone tells him like, "Hey, that's really good. It's clever. Not necessarily a lot of people are doing that." And I heard Rogan say this as well when he was interviewing Carrot Top, where it's like you used to see prop comics, like that used to be a genre of comedy, and then the way Carrot Top did it, he cornered the market. Like he did it differently than a lot of other people, to where it became like now Carrot Top is the go-to hack prop comic, but he was doing it differently than people. It wasn't just like some pun. There was actually some level of thought behind it. Again, I'm not going to say he's George Carlin or something, but he was trying to approach it differently than maybe a lot of guys were. The other thing I found interesting in there is I can't remember who else. Maybe Steve Martin? I can't remember who we did an episode on where they also said they were just doing someone else's material to basically learn how to do stand-up. Like, he just openly says, like, yeah, went on stage and I did George Carlin's act. And because it was at a time where there wasn't internet or anything, people were like, this guy's brilliant. but that's an interesting approach to take, to just be like, oh yeah, I started out like copying someone else. So already I'm realizing some of these clips aren't doing I was trying to wipe away all the disrespect that Carrot Top got, but some of these clips don't do that perfectly.
I get what he was doing though. He's kind of he just went up to see what it felt like, and once he was like, oh no, I like that, he started doing his own stuff.
It is a good way, like if you treat it like a sport, that is a good way to learn stage presence.
Right.
Like now, I don't know if you could do it as much because people at an open mic might be able to like, hey, that's a John Mulaney bit,
Oh, instantly.
So I don't know if you could get away with it now, but that is a good way to build up that muscle, I think.
And here's him talking about being looked down upon.
Yeah, so this is where we started to get into a common theme where, like, instantly, without even hearing his material, you hear prop comic and you start to shit on Carrot Top. And for whatever reason, like, you'll hear people shit on musical comedy or guys that do, like, parody songs or something. But then they'll always be like, yeah, but I like Weird Al. Like, Weird Al did it right. Like, he was all right, Okay. Like, there are certain guys that have that carry a cachet with them, even though they're doing the thing that's getting made fun of. And Carrot Top, for whatever reason, never had that. He's always been shit on.
Always, constantly. Yeah, less so now, probably because of interviews like this one and stuff, and people are like,
where he's just a regular guy. But,
yeah,
this is him talking about some of that disrespect.
First block you have is people who would not book you in their venue. Were there people who would not book you? What do you mean by that?
I mean that yeah, and it's they wouldn't book me. And then the strangest thing is they were all my friends that were booked at this club in Atlanta. And it was a huge club, and it was the A-list club, and from Foxworthy to everybody. And then I'd have friends like, oh, the Amazing Jonathan, friends of mine. Everyone worked the club, and so I knew the owner, and there was a big Christmas party. So I went to him and I said, I would like to play the club, and everyone and all my friends are already playing, and I'm already playing every club in that at the time, A clubs. And he just said, yeah, it's almost like the Carson thing in a sense, was that, just, not our kind of our cup of tea. And I was like, well, I'm not following what that means.
You're booking
Amazing Jonathan,
who's all these guys,
variety,
similar,
prop comedy, magic, right? And I'm like, what's different than that? And he just said, but he loved me. We'd sit here at the Christmas dinner and have a toast, and
it's so weird.
All the comics. And he just said, don't take it personally. And I'm like, well, I kind of did take it personally.
What should I take it?
Yeah, it is interesting because you look at, Jeff Foxworthy, I guess a respected comedian in some circle, but like a catchphrase comic, Right. Like, so that's definitely a gimmick. And then the Amazing Jonathan's pulling razor blades out of his mouth,
He's the best.
The thing I think of with Carrot Top most is it has to be, and this is not to say that the Amazing Jonathan is some regal, handsome figure or anything, but he looked like a guy. You know, Carrot Top is weird looking. He has the big floppy hair, and he dresses goofy, and he has kind of a silly voice. So I guess like the visual of it and the fact that he was a prop act caused people, even people that were saying, hey, magic comedy, perfectly fine, no problem. You with the trunk, put it down. You're not getting in here.
Turn around.
It is weird that like even in circles where gimmicky comics were getting respect, they looked at Carrot Top and said, hit the bricks, freak. We don't want you.
I feel like he looks more normal now, but when he was younger, he looked like almost like an alien to me.
he was odd looking, but and then he got to the point where he got super jacked.
Yeah.
And he says that he was not doing steroids, but he was taking essentially everything that you could get at a GNC. Like he was shoving it all into his body. I don't know. Some people will say, like, there is a thing where everyone who gets super jacked, you say, is on steroids, and everyone who does steroids says they don't. So I don't know. I'm not the guy to siphon out who is and who isn't. But he said basically he was just when he got to Vegas, he had nothing to do during the days. So he just worked out for like 3 hours a day and got crazy jacked. And that's even odder looking because you have the silly hair and the goofy face and then this, gladiator body. It's a weird combo.
Yeah, he was jacked, but he wasn't. I believe him. I don't think he looked steroid jacked.
He wasn't steroid big?
He was very cut though.
Yeah. That's like there were a bunch of blogs or whatever written saying he did steroids, but he said no. And he seems like the kind of guy I never understood why non-athletes would deny it. Like, what is he? Is George Mitchell gonna come knocking on his door? I think he's fine.
He's not selling anything like that Liver King guy.
Right.
But next we have him talking about appreciating comedy.
Okay, yeah, and this is where I say, like, he has a respect for comedy, and certain guy. I'm curious. I'd be curious to know what Jeff Dunham's life is like in these. Like, if he goes into the Comedy Cellar, is he being treated with respect or not? That I'd be curious to know. But Carrot Top definitely had a hard time with that, even though he was a guy that appreciated comedy.
That was my first prop I ever came up with.
What?
It was a hat just like this, and it had a spring and an old lady's head on it. And I said, you wear this so you'd see the lady's head behind driving. And that was my very first prop. And it killed. It was, I'm playing Boca Raton,
Right.
And that was the first thing. Like, this gets going somewhere. It had an old lady's head.
So your mind always just went to the...
No, it didn't, actually. Oh. Well, no, it did it then because I didn't know how to be a stand-up. And now that I've done it almost 40 years, I've started to appreciate how to become a stand-up. So I've slowed down and doing like what you like. It's a different world. It took a lot of time to get comfortable and being like letting a crowd listen to a story until there's a punchline.
Right.
I was scared to death. So I'd have to do prop.
I'm still scared to death.
That's my main takeaway from a lot of guys in the position of Carrot Top. I think maybe there's a presumption when you see them that they think of props as like doing something different. Like they think the way Seinfeld thinks of his comedy, Carrot Top thinks about his. I think there are some people that assume that. Mm-hmm. But what I always find interesting about hearing guys like Carrot Top talk is it's always more often from an angle of I didn't know what the fuck I was doing. The props thing came kind of easy to me, so I went with that, and I was making people laugh. I was succeeding off of that, so I didn't see a reason why suddenly I had to pretend I'm Eddie Murphy,
right?
When I'm not.
He always talks down about them too, in a way.
In a way, well, that Carrot Top does. You're saying?
Yeah.
I think it's almost because he's had to feel like he's accepted. There's this self-loathing that has come when you're told you're a putz for 40 years. Yeah. I think eventually, just to be able to sit at the table, you're like, and a phrase I heard him use in like 3 or 4 different interviews is like, I think now I'm finally allowed at the barbecues. Like now comedians will have me after 40 years of kind of wanting that acceptance. I think I'm technically there now. because of some of the things we're talking about, where you think like, oh, he's a circus clown, he's not a real human being, and then when you hear him on a podcast or a radio show, you're like, oh shit, he's just a regular guy. He might be a little more corny than Louis C.K., you know, but he's still a comic at the end of the day.
Yeah, I remember. I don't know when the special was from. It had to have been the '90s. He like pulled out a baseball bat, and for some reason there was like a chalk baseline on the stage, and he's like, "Oh, I found Daryl Strawberry's bat," and the bat like snorts up the baseline. It was pretty
Yeah,
fun.
he goes out of his way to say, and we'll talk about this in a bit too, but he goes out of his way to say, like, I'm not like a pun guy. Like, I don't think I'm as much of a hack as people say. I want there to be some clever angle to what I'm doing. Now, you can also say that he manufactures some of that stuff. Like, I heard him say one of his lines was he has like a dinosaur with a rope around its neck, and he goes, "Hey, it's Joe Biden's dog," or something like that. And it's like, that is a corny line that you're manufacturing, you know? I do get that. I get where like the hack label comes on him at times, but it's like a lot of what he's doing, there is a cleverness to it. And I'm assuming what you saw might have been some like late night appearance or HBO, but he's never actually put out like an hour-long special of his own, which is also pretty rare and bizarre for a guy who's as famous as he is. He talked to Howe Mandel about Howie Mandel actually had a very good idea for him, and it was he has a big warehouse in Vegas with all of his props throughout the years. And Howie Mandel was like, you know what a great special would be is just not even like your stage act, going through that warehouse and finding, there's going to be stuff in there that you don't even remember existed. Like finding each prop, doing the joke, talking about it. Like that could be a very interesting, you know, Netflix special / documentary or something.
Or if he goes through the warehouse, finds something, and then it cuts to him doing it on stage, like within the next week or something like that. Even
Anything like that, that would actually be very interesting to maybe hear the origin of some of those jokes and then how it plays out on stage or something. But
yeah, kind of like Seinfeld's last special, but way less pretentious.
But yeah, that it is amazing. I guess my generation for a time probably knew him best as the AT&T guy.
Oh,
he was in those call commercials. Yeah.
LLATT.
Yeah. That's what I knew him as for a long time, was that guy. And he says that he's run into people in Vegas, like at least around that time, that he ran into people in Vegas and they were like, "Oh, what are you doing out here?" And he's like, "I'm doing a show tonight." And they're like, "A show? Like a phone expo? What are you talking about?" He's like, "No, I'm a comedian." He's like, there was a time where people just knew me from those commercials, which is weird. It's kind of incredible that he got as famous as he is without putting out a comedy special. Like the only comparison I can think of is like Bobby Lee is pretty well known now in comedy and has never put out a special, and that's because of podcasting. Like you get to learn his personality and everything. Carrot Top never had that, so I guess his fame comes from all the late night appearances that he did. Eventually his Vegas act, the commercials, and ultimately just being a pop culture reference as a hack comedian. That's how he got very famous.
Yeah. Next we have him talking about doing the radio.
So this is what I'm talking about, where people have an assumption of him that is wiped away pretty quickly once you get to talk to him.
Like if I didn't know you were a prop comic and I was just talking to you and we were like comedians.
I'm not a prop comic.
Who meet backstage somewhere or something, and we were just talking, I wouldn't guess that you were. And I mean that as a compliment. It's not like, oh yeah, he's only funny when he's got the prop in his head. Yeah. He's a funny guy. Oh, you know, you sound like all my other good comic friends,
non-prop comic friends,
who are just funny. You know, it's not like you pull out props while we're talking. I mean, okay, you did a couple.
Well, that was yes. That was the fear I could. I mean, I might have something in. But that was the fear when I first started doing, like, when I did clubs, as you know, like way back. When they did clubs, they would have all the comics go on the radio shows. And they'd say, well, they would say, well, he's not going to go on the radio because he's a prop. And I said, I can fucking talk. I can tell stories. Right. And so I went going like Howard Stern, and they were blown away that,
right.
Do you have your props? I said, no, I don't need props. I'm talking. I've been doing this I can tell a story. I don't need to do my act on the thing.
You ever heard of Otto and George?
Well, but the idea that like Carrot Top would have to go on there and be like, well, how could we have Carrot Top on the radio? You can't see his props. It's like, well, I am a man. You could also interview me, Right. I'm a human man that's had a successful career. I could talk about other things other than being like, hey, what if this microphone had a wacky whatever the fuck? See, there's a skill to it, folks. But yeah, that he also told a story. I forget this was part of the Bill Maher thing, or maybe it was on Neil Brennan, but he said that when he went on Stern, he's in the green room, and you can hear the show, and they're talking for a while, and he's like, Howard's like, what am I going to talk to Carrot Top about? That whole thing.
Yeah.
And then, so Carrot Top's like, I just want to be, I want to go with the flow, be part of the show that I belong here. And then I guess this must have been in the serious days, because he said that he walked in and Stern was like, hey, so we were talking about bukkake earlier. Do you know what that is? And Carrot Top goes, oh, yeah, of course. And Howard Stern was like, do you like bukkake? And he's like, absolutely. And Howard was like, really? And he was like intrigued by that. And Carrot Top said he got a call after, and and one of his buddies was like, are you really into that? And Carrot Top's like, oh, I have no idea what it is. Why? He found out what he agreed to just to be part of the club.
Next, we have him talking about being on Carson.
Okay, so this is the big one. The major disrespect I thought that made me kind of shape the episode this way, because he auditioned. He got an audition to be on Carson's Tonight Show right at the end of its run. Pretty big deal. Matt, even to this day, if you're a comedy fan, I imagine the average.
That also gives you an idea of just how old he is.
Well, he got famous very young. He's only 58.
Yeah.
Maybe
really?
59 now. Yeah.
I thought it was going to be like 10 years older than that.
Well, he was essentially, he was thought of as like an overnight success. And he's one of those guys that he said by the time he got recognition, he had been doing it for 7 years, which is not a long time for a comic.
Matt Rife.
But it is. Matt Rife was doing it for 13, for God's sake. But there is a thing of like, 7 years is a long time. There are very few professions where it's like, I made no money for the first decade, and then I became extremely famous. Right. It's a weird balancing act that some people have to do. But he's considered an overnight success, even though it took him 7 years. But yeah, he was very young when he started getting recognized.
So Johnny had 2 months left in his tenure.
Yes, and Jim McCauley was a big fan of mine. I mean, he loved me. So he said, Scotty, I want you to come down and do a set. So I did a set, and all I remember was I did so well, and I remember dragging my stupid trunk down that little hallway, and Bud's yelling at me, move your shit. And I said, I'm trying to. And then he came over, Jim McCauley, and said, that was maybe the funniest set I've ever seen, ever. And I said, so can I do the show? And he said, I was going to be honest with you, and I love you more than you know, but you will never be on the Tonight Show with Johnny Carson. And I said, well, then why did I do this set? He said, I just wanted to see you. I wanted to see you sweat, and I wanted to see the shit. I swear. And I said, well, why won't I be on the Tonight Show? He said, because it's nothing personal. However, it's completely all personal, because he doesn't like variety, and he doesn't like props. He doesn't like magic. He doesn't like anything. And I remember saying literally to his face, I said, but the Tonight Show is all fucking variety. Everything from the throwing the hatchets to the Karnak, everything that he ever did on that show was variety. It was everything with the music and the thing. Ed was variety.
Right.
And he said, yeah, I know. I'm just letting you know. And I said, well, that sucks. And then I think it was maybe 2 weeks into Jay's where he took over, and I was on. And so those were still there. So I did perform in front of those chairs, but it was of course it was Jay, but
It did annoy me because Carson started as a magician, for God's sake.
Right. And he's had all of these types of comics on.
Yeah, it is. And Howie Mandel said the same thing kind of happened to him. He got on the Tonight Show he never could have if it was just Johnny. He got on because Joan Rivers invited him on, and then Carson saw him at home and was like, "Okay, you can be on." But it is some of these guys. It does build a self-awareness that other guys that get that famous, particularly that young, might not have. Where it's like it's kind of the Patrice O'Neill thing, where Patrice sort of governed comedy for a long time, where even the people that fucking hated him and didn't get the joke and were just like, "Fuck this guy," on some level, they would take his words seriously because he was calling out hackery. You know, he kind of prevented people from doing cornball shit. And I think that, you know, as much as we're poo-pooing some of the criticism that Carrot Top got, it did allow him to be more self-aware and more realistic. And it was interesting to hear him talk to Howe Mandel, who also had some of that in his act for a long time. Because Howe Mandel talks about it very realistically, too, where he was describing, I forget now who he was talking to, but he was describing his act. And he said that he was going to close on the inflating the glove, you know, Howie Mandel's bit, where he inflates the glove, he puts the glove over his nose and inflates it and it pops. I never understood that bit. And it was interesting to hear Howie Mandel talk about it because he's explaining it to, I think it might have been Bud Freeman who Carrot Top mentions there. And he's like, well, no, we want you to end on a laugh. And Howie's like, no, this gets a laugh. And the guy's like, well, why? And Howie Mandel's like, I don't know, but it does. I assure you.
That's a great answer. I don't know.
I like that because I think some people in that position start to smell their own shit. Like, if you get famous enough, you're like, well, I guess I'm doing everything right. Whereas it seems like guys like Howie Mandel and Carrot Top are like, listen, I'm not doing intellectual shit. I'm not fooling myself in anything. I'm making people laugh. It's silly horse shit, you know?
Right. Next, he's still with Howie and he's talking about building his props.
Oh, I just wanted to say one more thing about Carson too. And a Carrot Top points it out there, but it's like you come out as Karnak the Magnificent. You come out in a genie outfit, you hold cards to your head, and then read the punchlines that you've already written. You know, like, so don't look down. That's what annoys me. It is making people laugh still. The shit that Carrot Top did, you know.
Right.
Sorry, what did you say this clip was about?
Building his props.
Oh yeah, this I found interesting, and this speaks to the intricacy of some of these props. They weren't just, you know, shit that he found at a Toys R Us that he's riffing on. There's a lot of detail that goes into this.
Oh yeah.
You build all this stuff, right?
Yeah, most of it. NASA builds some of it. I have people. Yeah.
But you're making a joke. But wasn't your father a NASA engineer?
He was. See, my dad does. But that's why, in a sense, that statement was true. My dad did build me some things, and he did work at NASA. So a lot of the stuff was built from NASA. Yeah, I had a helmet that had these little NASCARs that go around it. So if you can't go to a NASCAR race, you wear this home so you feel like you're at the race. It was stupid, but my dad's like, "Oh, I can make that."
Really?
So he made a lot of props.
So did people ever walk into his office at NASA and think, this is
and
not
there building?
He's got Hot Wheels and a little track. What planet is this for?
Is this for the shuttle? What is it for the Skylab? What is this? Yeah.
Did he work on the shuttle?
Yeah, he worked on Skylab and Apollo and all that. Yeah.
It's wild. This guy that was doing all that, he trained astronauts to drive those dune buggies, whatever the fuck they are that they drive on the moon.
Oh yeah.
He trained astronauts to drive those things, according to Carrot Top, which is pretty wild that the same guy that was doing that was teaching, John Glenn or whoever, it's like, also is making the pocketbook that shoots tampons. But he said that his mother was very supportive of his career, but his dad, being a NASA man, was always like, kind of, you belong here. And he had a very funny line because I guess his brother was an F-16 fighter pilot in the Air Force.
Mm-hmm.
And he goes, my brother flies F-16s and I'm gluing dildos to watches and making punchlines out of them. Which I thought was very funny. It's the perfect... Those are the two perfect items to use for that joke. I thought.
Yes.
Gluing dildos to watches.
Next we have him on Rogan talking about Family Guy.
Yeah, so this is what I was talking about earlier, where this you could tell bothered him, where and maybe some people will agree or disagree. Comment your thoughts on this clip, because you can look at this one of two ways, I think. Either Carrot Top taking himself too seriously, or finally drawing a line where it's like, listen, I can be shit on for a lot of things, but I'm not a complete hack, you know?
Yeah.
So Family Guy wanted to make a joke about him, and they reached out to Carrot Top to do the voice for it.
When I did the Family Guy, they said, they called, they said, we got the thing all ready, and they sent me the script. And I was like, so the joke is, it's a seesaw, right? So I'm like, so its prop is a saw with glasses on it, right? And that's kind of not what I do, right? And so I was like, oh man, this is, I don't like this. If we change it to something that I do. And the guy, Seth McFarland says, dude, no, this is, it's fucking great. And I said, I know, but seesaw, it's really stupid. And he says, well, I wrote it. I said, no, it's not that stupid then. I said, no, I just want to do, can I do one of my props? He said, well, two things wrong. We already have the animation done.
Right.
And secondly, everyone loves it. And if you want to do it, we'll just get someone else to do the voice. It's fine. I said, no, I want to do it. If we can't, fuck it. So I did it. And I still to this day get people go, dude, seesaw. So they were right. And I just was like, damn it. I want it to be a little more, but whatever.
I get it.
Yeah.
Well, also, you've got to be a little defensive after all the years of people shitting on you.
Yeah.
For sure. And it's, it is, first of all, more Carrot Top getting pushed around, where Seth MacFarlane's like, well, it's all right. We could get someone else to do it, I guess, because we already drew it.
And then once he's like, no, I'll do it.
Carrot Top has to be like, fine. I'll play your game. So it is, if you haven't seen that particular clip, it is like Peter's talking to Carrot Top, and he's like, what is this saw with glasses? And Carrot Top goes, oh, that's my seesaw. And Peter cracks up and goes, oh, you, sir, are a delight. And it's very funny. And Seth MacFarlane's right. That is a funnier line than trying to show the people what Carrot Top's actual material would be,
Right.
Like, that is a funny line. But you can hear in Carrot Top's voice, they're just pleading like, yeah, but I don't do that. Like, stop making me out to be more of a hack than I am, I get it. I play with toys on stage. I understand. But there's some kind of art to it that I'm trying to do here,
Right. Next we have him talking about Carlin.
Yeah, so this is interesting. And Carlin, as we've talked about in other episodes, has always been super supportive of comics. That's where Keep Kicking Him in the Nuts comes from, Joe DeRosa's famous tattoo. But this is an instance where Carlin has specific material of Carrot Top's that he enjoyed.
Well, I love George Carlin. I got to meet him, and he couldn't have been more gracious and nice to me. In fact, that was one of the very first comics that came up to me and said, "You're a funny." It was at airport. He said, "You were a funny fucker."
Great.
And I remember thinking, wow, George Carlin said I was, and then he went on to tell me my joke. So it wasn't like he was just saying, he knew the bit he liked.
Yeah.
He said, that bit that you do with the phone. And I said, oh, and he says, that's ingenious. So it was a paper cups and string joke phone, hey, what's going on with the string? They had them forever for kids. And 90s or whenever the hell I started, 80s something, I started comedy. That was one of my props. I said, they always have the paper cups and string phone. They should have an updated version. They never updated it for today's world. So I'd have another cup that came out for call waiting, and then 3 cups for conference calling, and had a clear cup for caller ID. And he said, he said, that fucking, how the hell do you, I said, oh, it's like me asking you how you came up with the shit, the bit, I got more shit over here and shit. And he said, but that's, I said, no, it's the same thing. I don't know. I just thought of it. I said, I'm looking at a Paper Cups phone. I said, we need to have another call waiting. And he said, well, that's great. And I remember thinking that was the first legitimate, comic, a brilliant.
I don't know any comic that wouldn't have been excited to be complimented by George. Pryor would have been excited. Cosby would have been excited.
Yeah, so it's amazing, especially the era he came up in. You wouldn't, and just his demeanor and the fact that, he was going to call an album, I really like it when a lot of people die. And it was supposed to come out on 9/11, I think. Is the same one?
Yeah.
So you wouldn't expect that guy to be as helpful to comedians as he has been. But like, you remember Gary Shandling? I think we played a story that Gary Shandling was telling, where he, as like a young comic, presented material he had written and handed it to George Carlin, which is like anyone else would have been like, "Oh, great," and just thrown it in the trash. Carlin was like, "Come back and I'll tell you my thoughts tomorrow night," and he did. So Carlin genuinely liked helping young comics. And again, the stereotype of Carlin would be that he would shit on someone like Carrot Top, but to kind of take the time to compliment him and specifically remember a joke he told.
That's
really that's crazy. That really speaks to how nurturing Carlin was to other comics, which is pretty impressive. And I just noticed when he was telling that story where Carrot Top was explaining what the paper cups and the caller ID. And when I heard Craig laugh at that, I was like, that's why, maybe he doesn't understand it. That's why the Family Guy joke is perfect.
Right.
Where it's like, even when he's just explaining the joke and you're like, oh, you rascal, you.
Was the clear cup was caller ID. I was like, come on.
You son of a bitch. Where it is like what Carrot Top does. And now here's the interesting thing about me defending Carrot Top. I literally can't appreciate a single joke he tells. It's all visual.
That's right.
Like, I'm his defense, literally his blind defense, where nothing he does makes me laugh. It can't. But I do have a respect for where it is like a magic trick that he's doing.
Right.
Where he has these things, he sees these, two things combined or whatever it is, and is able to come up with a joke for him to the point where he's presenting this image to the audience and you don't see where he's going until he says it. Like, that is sort of a magic trick. I might use this comparison too often, but it kind of, in a weird way, you would never think to compare these two guys, but it reminds me a little of Anthony Jeselnik, where it's like he's telling you where he's going and you still don't see it coming.
Right.
Like, he lays out the premise and then gives what feels like a 30-second pause and then delivers the punchline, and you're like, holy fuck. Whereas Carrot Top, plops something on the table and you're looking at it, wondering where he's going to go with it, and you're still not able to guess necessarily. And he does, he does play to his audience. I remember he was on Opie and Anthony with Patrice, by the way.
Mm-hmm.
And it was funny because he's an example of knowing your audience is, he had something, I forget if it was toilet related or what it was. And he goes, yeah, I'm doing Rageous later. He loves the toilet stuff. So it was just like him knowing what props to have for what hosts,
Right. Next we have him talking about Gallagher.
This is a great rivalry. This is worth I think it's like a 24-minute segment that they clipped out that you can watch on its own on YouTube if you want to go find it. But this is a fascinating story about the relationship between Gallagher and Carrot Top. Now, we've talked a lot about Carrot Top's attitude. If you go back and watch the Gallagher episode, it was pretty much the opposite of this, where we said Gallagher had the exact wrong attitude his entire career. He was an incredibly bitter guy. He could never accept who he was. Carrot Top, as we've laid out, is the exact opposite. Completely accepts who he is. So it's interesting to hear Carrot Top talk about their paths crossing.
And so then all of a sudden years go by and it was in LA and I run into him somewhere. And then I said, hey, I'm doing comedy at these clubs. And he's like, oh, wow. And then I'm on the Tonight Show and I call the manager and I say, hey, I'm on the Tonight Show tonight. And he's like, we're on what show tonight? I said, I'm on the Tonight Show tonight. Tell Gallagher to watch it. And he's like everyone was like, how the fuck did you get on the Tonight Show? Including myself, seriously. Like everyone, even the people that booked me, like how the fuck did
Jay Leno when he's reading the
Jay was like, how the fuck did it
fucking
happen?
carrots?
How did it happen? So I killed. It was my first thing, and I come out. I look like the Wendy's girl or whatever freaking joke I did. And Gallagher, of course, I killed. I'm thinking I'm going to get great news back from Gallagher, and he was, not happy, I guess, because I kind of, I wasn't doing his act. I was just doing comedy. I was doing my own thing, but he was just like, how the fuck did this kid become, he was mad. At one point he just said, yeah, I was a little fucking jealous, but it was like, well, you don't be jealous. I'm not doing your act, but I'm doing my own act, but I'm just doing comedy. He was mad that I even got into comedy. So then it went on and on and on for years. And then he really didn't like me, and he thought that I was doing his act.
Yeah, so the kind of backstory there is Carrot Top met Gallagher when he was a kid, like very young, and gave Gallagher a joke that Gallagher ended up using. So it's funny, if one of them actually stole anything from anyone, it would be Gallagher literally used a joke Carrot Top gave him. That's how they forged a bond. And then when Carrot Top legitimately got into comedy, and you hear there, like when he got something like The Tonight Show, Gallagher just becomes completely bitter. Now there are some similarities, not just in the fact that Gallagher used props. It was Carrot Top's entire act, so I do think it's different. But like the way they dressed, you could say was similar. So I've heard that the phrase a lot in comedy, stealing someone's essence, where it's basically like you're not taking their jokes, but you're kind of adopting their personality, their look, their cadence sometimes, the way they talk. Like I remember hearing, and if you think of these two guys, it does make sense. I've heard people say that about Pete Holmes and TJ Miller, where it's like Pete Holmes kind of adopted TJ Miller's essence, so to speak, where if you do listen to them, like they have similar deliveries and things like that, and you can kind of understand where someone would be like, you're kind of ripping off my thing, even though I can't pinpoint it,
Right. No, I can see that one for sure.
So I think that's maybe where Gallagher was coming from. But like, if you go look at what Gallagher was doing, this is what's interesting is Gallagher never accepted how he was seen in the public, and couldn't just say like, hey, I am doing smarter material up front and then smashing watermelons,
Right.
Like he couldn't just accept that that's who he was. He was like, oh no, Carrot Top exists, so people are going to think I'm like him. When it's like, no, I think if Gallagher was more accepting of who he was, people in the comedy scene would have respected him more and had his back. The way you start to hear people like Rogan and Bill Maher and Neil Brennan, the people that we've played clips of today, you'll hear guys like that be like, hey, listen, like Carrot Top does what he does. He's still a comic,
Right.
And Gallagher missed out on that because he was such a miserable asshole to everyone,
I remember hating him so much at the end of that episode.
And it was funny too, because it was right out. We did the episode like the week he died. I think.
Yeah, he dies, and then we're like, this guy fucking sucks.
Oops. But you know who's alive is Carrot Top, who has more to say about Gallagher. I think this is about Gallagher too, right?
Yeah.
So let me just say that the part that I don't think we said, I don't think I realized this until I heard Carrot Top tell the story. It's not Gallagher 2, like Gallagher the second. It's Gallagher also.
Yes.
TOO.
Yep.
So, the reason it's done like that is because when it's on Billboard, when he's on a show, like let's say he's at the Comedy Store, you might see, hey, it's Richard Pryor, Robin Williams, and Gallagher too, and you're like, oh, nice. But it, of course, wasn't the real Gallagher. But early on in their relationship, the Gallagher brothers had kind of an agreement, and that's where Carrot Top comes in.
So he was doing it, and he would let his brother do it.
Yes, because I was doing. If I'm in Seattle and Gallagher, the original Gallagher's in Ohio, they needed another Gallagher to be over near to compete against the Carrot. Yeah.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
So he.
I mean,
basically,
allegedly
hired.
No,
his
he allegedly.
brother.
No, he didn't allegedly hire. He hired his brother. I'm saying about me.
Right. And he Gallagher too kept having gigs near you.
No, not all the time, but a lot, often enough where we're like he's trying to compete to put me out.
So he would
and I brought that up to Gallagher. I brought it to original Gallagher, and then Gallagher said, "Well, you know how that ended with my brother." I said, "I know, but when it was happening." He said,
he opened a Gallagher franchise across the street from the local Carrot Top.
So basically what happened was Carrot Top would go to these cities, he'd be in Spokane, let's say, and look across the street and it's like, oh, it's Gallagher too. That's interesting. Then he'd go to Tampa. Gallagher 2's there again. It's like when we talked about Dan Ninen when he was opening for Russell Peters, where it's like the first couple, Russell Peters is like, boy, what a coincidence. This guy keeps opening for me in these different cities. By the third or fourth, you're like, this can't be a coincidence.
Right.
They're clearly following me around the country. So Gallagher used the excuse of like, oh, my brother went rogue, but what Carrot Top's saying there, I don't know if it was clear or not. Basically, what Carrot Top was alleging is like, yeah, but when he was doing this, he had your blessing to do it. Which makes me think you were kind of telling him, go take a chunk of Carrot Top's audience.
Right.
Because people are going to want to see one prop guy or the other, so maybe Carrot Top won't sell out. Which is really a truly psychotic and bitter way to live your life if you're Gallagher.
I would go to the opposite part of where both of them are and make the most money.
I mean, it's sick to count someone else's money in general. Like to have your life consumed by like, oh, this guy's making more than me, but I think I'm more talented. But to actively say, to fund someone who is going out and trying to eat up Carrot Top's audience is truly sick. But
yeah. But here he's meeting with Gallagher and he talks about that.
Yeah, so this is a longer clip, but this is where it all kind of culminates between the two of them, Carrot Top and Gallagher.
Kid in the valet, don't know, it's just random kids like, oh, dude, can I get a picture with you? I said, yeah. I said, Gallagher. So I take a picture of the kid. Gallagher walks up. I said, okay, wait, one more. There's one. And then Gallagher says, what the fuck's that? I said, what's what? He says, what's that? And I said, what's what? What are you talking about? The kid with the camera. Did you hire that guy to fucking come take a picture of us? And it was so weird. I was like, what guy? He is the guy that we just took the picture with you. I said, I don't know who that guy is. The guy was just I don't know who he's a fan. So let me get this straight. You had me meet you here so you could have the newspaper come film us to make something out of this. And I'm like, Gallagher, look at me real quick. Gallagher, seriously, dude, what are you talking about? He says, the fucking guy with the camera. I said, let the guy with the camera go. I don't know who he is. He was a random kid that wanted a picture. Let's go have a cup of coffee now. And he's like, no, I'm not going anywhere till you tell me why you hired this guy to come take a picture of us. And I'm like, dude. Now this went on for 15 minutes. I finally calmed him down enough to say, I think you've lost your mind. I don't know the kid. Okay. I didn't hire anybody. And why would I hire the newspaper to come take a picture of us?
Yeah.
So he's like, well, whatever. He's looking for a cigarette. I don't smoke. I don't have anything. I said, can we go get a cup of coffee? And he goes, no, I'm not gonna have a cup of coffee with you. I said, okay, well then I'm going to go. And he says, but let me just set this straight while you're here. And I said, okay, set what straight? First you stole my fucking act. And then you stole my manager. I said, I didn't take your act or your manager. No. And the fact that you took my act, I want to talk about this. And I said, I would love to talk about this. What part of your act did I take? He said, this is great. He said, you took the stupid part. You didn't take the smart part. If you were going to steal from me, why would you not steal the smart part? Why would you not take the words? Why would you not take my stand-up? Why would you take the fucking lowest common denominator with all my stupid shit? And I said, well, first of all, to set the record straight, it's my stupid shit that I came up with. It's not your stupid shit. And now that you said it, I should have stolen your words. You are, because you were a brilliant stand-up. And he's like, I'm a great fucking stand-up. And I said, you are probably one of the best stand-ups I've ever studied and watched. He said, then why'd you take the stupid shit? I said, first of all, I didn't take anything.
Yeah, it's fascinating to watch such a conspiratorial, just a guy on edge. Like he thinks the whole world is out to get him for whatever reason. Very, very strange character, Gallagher. But it's interesting, and you hear that a lot, that Gallagher was doing smart comedy. It didn't do anything for me when I went back and watched his, like the hours that are available on YouTube. I didn't really care for it. It felt to me like a guy trying to be George Carlin. But that's with the power of hindsight. You know, maybe in that time it was truly brilliant and original. I don't know. But like Carrot Top looked up to Gallagher, also didn't steal from him. Like, Gallagher would go on the end of his show and smash watermelons, which was supposed to be I don't know, some parody of the Vegematic or something like that. Whatever. That is not, that doesn't mean he owns props, you know?
It's the same thing as cocaine Daryl Strawberry bat.
Well, right. If I went on stage with a prop, you can call me a hack and you can say the joke is bad. I'm not stealing from Carrot Top unless I literally take what he's doing. You know what I mean? Like if you go on stage and smash watermelons, then you're stealing from Gallagher. But just the idea like that Gallagher had the ownership of prop comedy and also truly resented it. Like the balls to say to Carrot Top, well, you stole the stupid shit. And it's like, so you want ownership of a thing you never wanted, which is fascinating to me, you know? That's the last Gallagher clip, right?
That's our last clip before the segment that kind of contradicts this whole episode.
Well, listen. But, I just wanted to tell one more Gallagher story, which again, if you're interested, go watch the full Neil Brennan interview because Carrot Top's very good in it. But basically he goes on to tell the story of Gallagher was going to Carrot Top's show and then was like showing up and critiquing his act before the show and being like, oh, the way you have this trunk facing is stupid. It should be the other way. And you should present this way, not that way. Like critiquing everything Carrot Top was doing. And Carrot Top was just like, hey, nice to have you, Gallagher. Like just polite to him. And then Gallagher would stay through the show and then like criticize him afterwards. Again, like dress him down. So eventually, one night, Carrot Top was like, hey, are you going to be here tomorrow? And Gallagher was like, I don't know why. Like already accusatory. Carrot Top was like, I think it would be great if I just picked up picked up a watermelon and a sledgehammer, whatever the hell else, and made reference to you, and then you came out on stage. I think people would lose their minds. And Gallagher's like, no, why would I do that? He's very angry about it. Carrot Top's like, just fucking trust me, will you? And then they go through with it, and they did the thing, and he got a big ovation. And then after the show, Gallagher was still like, that was really stupid. I don't know why he had me do that. And Carrot Top was like, whatever, man. Good to see you.
Why would you put up with someone like that?
I don't know. Because Carrot Top just seems like a nice guy.
Apparently. And then he was trying to get his friend over. Be like, how about you have a night of joy? And
yeah, right? Wouldn't it be great if the audience liked you? Wouldn't that be cool?
Yeah.
Yeah. So ultimately, we are a pro Carrot Top show here. We like Carrot Top. And we often close the show with a little Norm, our friend Norm MacDonald. Mm-hmm. But this is just an example. We're playing this to show just how wrong Norm is. It's right. It's wrong what he did here. He's another one of these people that judged our boy Carrot Top. This, of course, is a clip we played before on the Norman Conan episode.
And it's by far the best late night performance probably ever.
I think a lot of people would agree with that. Best late night appearance ever. I think certainly the best, like, second guy on the couch contribution ever.
No doubt.
So, if you know anything about Norm, you already know what we're playing, but I hope you enjoy this.
Carrot Top. You are making a movie with Carrot Top, right?
I made a movie with Carrot Top.
Okay. You made a movie with Carrot Top. It's
he
not
used to
out
look
yet.
real weird.
No, can you put the picture up of Carrot Top again just so we can all see him? Oh, there it is again. Yeah. All right. Okay.
Wait a minute. She left Melrose Place to do a movie with Carrot Top?
That's where I'm going, my friend. This begs the question now. Why a movie with Carrot Top?
Why a movie with Carrot Top?
I mean, no, I don't know much about Carrot Top, I don't know much about him. I'm a little jealous because he's a red-haired comedian, and I felt like maybe you'd do a movie with me first, then move on to Carrot Top, then to Ralph Mal from Happy Days. Sort of the three. There's an order in which you do movies with the redheads. What's he like?
One thing a lot of people say about this clip is that, so Courtney Thorne-Smith, if you're not familiar with the clip, is the guest. And she's leaving Melrose Place to do this movie with Carrot Top, obviously. And everyone says, oh, Norm saved her, like she was having a bad appearance. Conan's not great in this interview. He doesn't really know what to talk to her about either. So Norm kind of saves the interview here.
Extraordinarily sweet.
Nice guy.
He really is. And he worked very hard and he was adorable.
And he worked with a lot of props and stuff too, right?
Not in the movie.
Oh, in the movie they took his props away?
They took his props away.
That's a bad time to suddenly take away everything you know about comedy. You know, you've been using props now all your life for comedy. Now we're going to take them away when you make your first movie. Was he okay though with it? He was cool.
He was great. He did a wonderful job.
Do you have a scene where you and him embrace?
Yeah, lots of making out.
Oh, for God's sake!
Nothing but making out.
All right.
It's like 9.5 weeks, but Carrot Top. We were doing.
Wow! I gotta check out that movie.
Is it called 9.5 Seconds? Like he's premature ejaculator.
You know what happened? This is what happened. You know what happened? He said 9.5 seconds, and I'm looking at him because I know there's more. And I wait and wait, and I see the glimmer in the eye, and then bang! I thought you were going to, but no.
Crack whore is what they believe.
But what's the movie going to be called?
Well,
Really?
I know what it's going to be called.
Yeah, what's that?
If it's got Carrot Top in it, you know what a good name for it would be?
What's that, Norm?
Box Office Poison.
She's in it. Lauren Smith, the girl sitting to your left, is in the movie.
I'm going to go see it for fun.
You scare everybody else away?
No, I love this girl. I'd see any movie with this girl in it. She's a beautiful lady and a talented, nice talk show guest.
Can I say that's the other than the ladies on The View? That's the kind of charm Norm has, that he's trashing this girl's movie. And she's having fun with it.
Little does she know it gets worse.
Her appearance on our rival show. All right. Well, there's this 2-hour season finale of Melrose Place. There's this movie coming out.
Yes.
Title undetermined at this point.
Chairman of the board.
Oh, all right. Do something with that, you freak.
I bet the board is spelled B-O-R-E-D.
So quick.
Conan's reaction is all time.
It's so quick, and I'll tell you, I've heard on podcasts now. I've probably even done it. Like, that's now a very easy. Like, oh, do you mean B-O-R-E-D?
Yeah.
It's kind of like when someone does an impression, and then that kind of breaks down the wall of how to do the impression.
Yeah.
Like, now, if you hear, that's an easy reflex to have if it presents itself with the right joke. But at that time, before Norm did that, before that became such a popular clip, to have that quick of a reflex,
right?
Because to Conan's point, like, the reason Conan says it like that is basically like chairman of the board seems like such a bland, boring title. Like, how would you possibly make that funny? And Norm immediately goes, is it spelled B-O-R-E-D? And Conan's like, you motherfucker. Yeah, one of the greatest talk show appearances ever. To no surprise, chairman of the board did not do well. But again, Carrot Top is the right attitude. His quote on that, I'm paraphrasing, but basically he was like, it wasn't some Oscar-winning movie. It wasn't even a Jim Carrey movie. It was just a movie. It was fine.
Yeah.
So Carrot Top was like, hey, you know, I got to be in a movie. That's kind of cool, you know?
Pretty cool.
So the man has the right attitude about comedy, for God's sake. All right? Tell me if you agree or disagree in the comments. But I hope that, if nothing else, this episode leads to you people having some goddamn respect for Carrot Top, will you?
Respect
Stop bullying
him.
the man. Yeah.
Start right now.
He's at a Vegas residency for 18 years. He does a show 6 nights a week, and then I think he said he does like 4 weeks on, 1 week off. So, crazy schedule. So just any night, pretty much any night you go to Vegas, you can see Carrot Top. So go check the man out, I guess.
You might have to go check him out when you go to Skankfest.
Well, here's the thing: it is useless to me.
Oh yeah, that's right.
You know,
Yeah.
I'm like, I can imagine what he's talking about.
Go for a vibe check.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I'll go check out Carrot Top. But yeah, shout out to Carrot Top and support this program if you'd be so kind. Sound off in the comments, as we like to say. Leave a comment, your thoughts on Carrot Top, and let me know. Maybe we can always do an episode on the life and career of Scott Thompson. But this is the aspect of his life that interested me more is the amount of disrespect he got. So let me know in the comments if you like this episode and you want to hear another one on Carrot Top. We can dig more into his life.
Yeah, we could possibly go do a life and career. You guys want to hear about him growing up with the struggle of having a dad who worked for NASA? You think he had a tough upbringing?
He was in the kitchen with a soup strainer and a wood spoon, and he's like, I could do something with this. But yeah, so go to blindmike.net. That's where all of our links are. If you want to support this program, however you see fit, wherever you get podcasts, all our links are there. Help the algorithm. Leave a 5-star review, like, comment, share, post us in your Instagram stories. Whatever you can do to spread the word, we appreciate that. And then if you want to support the program financially, then it's just $5 a month, the price of a cup of coffee every single month. To get early access and bonus content, you can become a member on YouTube or Patreon, whichever platform is easier for you. All the links are at blindmike.net, is where you can find everything related to Why You Laughing, Blind Mike Project, and Who Are These Socials. So check all that out. And Very Good Show is where verygoodshow.org is where you can find all Craig's stuff. He does a true crime podcast called Rubbed Out. And do you still do Very Good Show?
Yep. I don't know when this is coming out, but tonight. This should be a new one.
Well, wherever is tonight for you, go watch Very Good Show.
Yeah.
Verygoodshow.org. And then support our boy Hackride, hackridethedemon.com. He does all our clips and social media and thumbnails and all that good stuff. So support the fine work that gentleman does. And we will talk to you guys next time on Why Are You Laughing?
Zip it up and zip it out.